Welcome, everyone. We are so blessed today. We have Anthony Moros with us. Anthony Moros is the author of the biography of Father Mina Aboud. So we're very excited to discuss his book today. So many, like me, have fallen in love with Father Mina because of Anthony's book, where he went and he spoke to Father Mina's wife and many other people in Egypt, and he wrote this biography for us. We thank you so much, Anthony, in advance.
And thank you, Father Gabriel. It's a blessing.
Thank you very much for being here.
And thank you. The blessing's all mine.
And we also have Mark. Mark, it's nice to have you again with us.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be here.
It is always a blessing to have you.
Thank you very much.
So, Anthony, let's start. So, what comes to mind? Like, how do you start, thinking about, I want to write a book about Father Mina Aboud? Who introduced you to him in the first place? You give us an idea of what happened there.
So, to be honest, Father, I never really intended to write a biography or a book or anything. So my introduction to Abuna Mina happened actually on the day of his martyrdom. I remember I was in Canada, and it was the summer of 2013. I remember I was sitting on the couch and I was just scrolling through Facebook, and I came across this news posting. Someone said that a priest had been martyred in Sinai. And with all the events happening at the time, the revolution that was occurring, I thought it was just a natural byproduct of the horrible events that were going on. So I remember seeing this picture of this young priest. The picture was a photo of Abuna Mina. He had just started his 40 days at the beginning of his priesthood. So he didn't have a beard. It was just like a 5 o'clock shadow. And he was looking up to heaven. He was praying. The initial thought I had was, poor guy. But it looked like he was just a normal person, normal guy.
Yeah.
I didn't think too much of it. And like I said, this was 2013. So a few years later, I had started college. It was, I'd probably say it was around 2017 or 2018. And I started to hear of miracles being attributed to this normal guy. And I started to look more into it. I started to actually ask for his intercessions, and they seemed to work. There were personal miracles that were happening in my life through the prayers of Father Mina Aboud.
And many more since then, right?
Oh, many more.
Yeah.
We'll definitely dive into that.
Yeah,
but
can't wait.
I remember really starting to think okay, this idea I had of normal guy, he's no longer a normal guy. And with time passing, I was discovering that truly Father Mina was not just a normal person. So diving into how the book started coming about, I usually go spend retreats in Egypt every year. So I was introduced to someone who was with Father Mina the night he was martyred.
Oh, really?
So he was explaining to me that, and again, we'll start to discuss a little bit about the events of his martyrdom, prior to his martyrdom, but he was telling me I was with him the night he was martyred. And he told me that I am very familiar with his wife, Sister Maryam, and if you want, I know you like to visit the monasteries and the churches and things like that. What do you think about us going to visit Tasoni Maryam? I said, sure, why not? I was honestly a little bit apprehensive because I thought I was going to go in order to console her. She was going to tell me his story. She was going to cry. I was going to tap on her shoulder, tell her it's okay, he's in heaven. I thought it was going to be awkward. But in reality, I went and visited her, and I was the one who was consoled.
Really?
When I went to visit Tasoni, I remember sitting down with her, and she pulled out a watermelon. She was very sweet. And we started just snacking, and then she's like, okay, tell me, what do you want to know about Abuna? And I said, everything. I'm here. I'm like, do you have anything to do today? And she's like, no, I'm home all day. She's like, you want to know everything? I'm like, yeah. And she's like, okay. She's like, the most thing I love in the world is to talk about Habibi, talk about my love. But she said, I want to preface by saying that Abuna Mina is just a normal guy. And I remember looking around her apartment. She had icons of him all over the walls. Some of them had like Christ photoshopped in, like with halos and gold leaf. And she had his relics like on a little table in the living room. Everything about him seemed like he's not normal. You know, we walk into church, we see the relics of the saints. These are people who seem so far off.
Yeah.
And I see his relics in front of me. So I was thinking, you're telling me he's normal. I thought he was normal originally. But how could he be normal with everything I'm seeing, everything I'm hearing? So she told me the most candid story of a saint I had ever heard in my life. It was so raw. It was so real. It felt like sainthood was within arm's reach. And I remember feeling so affected that I told her, I'm like, I need to bring this back to the US, to Canada. I need to share this. I told her, do you have anything written about him in English? Even just like small booklets or anything. And she told me, unfortunately, no one really cared to compile anything about him in English. She said the most we've done was a small booklet written in Arabic. She's like, if you want, you can translate that. So I told her, okay, sure. So when I got back to the US, I was flipping through the book and it was just dates.
Do you read Arabic?
Yeah, I do.
You do? Okay,
Yeah.
very good.
So I was reading through and it was just dates. Just like he was born on this day, he was ordained on this day, he was martyred on this day. And then just 90% of the book was miracles. And I remember calling her and I told her, where's the meat of the story? I sat with her that day for, I think, 6 hours. And we discussed everything. His upbringing, their courting period, their marriage, his service, the martyrdom. And she was showing me around and I said, where's the meat of the story? There's nothing written. And I told her, with your permission, I'd love to take the blessing of compiling something more complete for Abuna. So by God's grace, it took about 2.5 years. And then God was able to release this beautiful story about Abuna.
Yeah, it's a wonderful work. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
So give us a couple of examples of what makes Father Mina Aboud like a normal person.
I remember one of the things Sister Mariam was telling me was the fact she's like, we were just a normal couple. You know, sometimes I think we exaggerate clergy. We think of them as something that are so high up, but she's like, we were completely normal. Like, he would tease me, we would fight, and the thing is like she'd tell me like the moment I would cry or the moment he'd see my tears is when we'd like stop. You know, he was very approachable in the way he would deal with the youth. He was just a normal person. He would joke and laugh and go around and go out with his friends and sit with his daughters, and he was a normal person. But God worked in that normalcy to make a saint out of him. He used some of even his weaknesses. Tassoni was, like I said, this was so candid that she was not afraid to tell me about some of the moments of doubt that he had. There was an instance where she explained how he was originally from Aswan in Upper Egypt.
Okay.
And he moved down to Cairo, and that's where he started serving. And there was an inclination to consecration. And as time passed, God had called him to the priesthood in Cairo. And what happened was there was a situation where the bishop who was visiting the church at the time had asked for a nomination of several servants in the church. And he told the congregation, I need you to write down the names of a couple people. The top 3 people are the ones we're going to ordain. And his name at the end of the night, after they counted, was, I think, number 2.
Okay.
So by that, everyone started congratulating him, calling him, telling him Abuna. It was official,
Which is very wrong.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it was official, you know, like based on what the bishop said. That's it.
Yeah, but
The
that's
bishop.
not how it works, though.
Very Egyptian to jump the gun.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly,
The bishop ended up calling him, I think, a day or 2 later, and told him, we're going to have to take your name out of this ordination, but we'll consider you in a future round. So they
And that's why it's wrong.
they praised him one day, and the next day it was a mess.
It was a no one. Nobody.
Tasoni would tell me, she'd like, I'd walk into church, people would look at me, and they'd like look at me, then look at each other and start whispering.
Yeah.
And then rumors were being spread that, the bishop heard that he had done something in Aswan, and that's why when he found out, he pulled his name from the nomination. Horrible, horrible rumors. And in the midst of all this, he refused to back away from service. Tasoni, on the other hand, she told me, she said, I was weeping constantly. She's like, I even considered changing churches. Again, just very candid, very real.
Yeah.
And Abuna, at the time, his name was Salib, pre-ordination. Salib told her, why are you crying? You know, we never asked for this. If God wants us, great. If he doesn't, it's okay. So she told me that one night they were watching a movie. It was a saint movie. And there was a priest in the movie who was saying that the priest gets a direct call from God to serve. And she looked over and she saw Salib weeping. So she looked at him and she said, you know, you've always told me to stop crying. Like, why are you crying now? So he sat there for a moment and he said, I'm afraid, what if God revealed something to his grace, the bishop, and told him that I'm unfit for service? And he sat there again for a couple moments and then he started to sob and told her, I'm afraid that God rejected me.
That's a very difficult feeling.
It's very difficult. Yeah. And I think it's for her to reveal something like that. When we read the stories of the saints in the Synaxarium, in other books, personally, I thought they're very often romanticized.
Yeah.
They don't reveal the struggles of the person to get to that holiness. The path to holiness is not up the mountain slope like this. There are ups and downs. And Abuna's story really proved that to me. I remember when she told me this specific instance, I'm like, he has periods of doubts like I do. He has periods of doubts like we all do.
Can you
and
give
yet
us
look
an
at him
example?
now.
Do you remember?
That instance, he was he was doubting in God's acceptance of him. He said, God rejected me. These moments are used by God in order to make saints out of us. Yani, he chooses us in spite of our weaknesses.
Yeah.
So that was one of the instances I think that really affected me deeply. And made me feel like he's just normal. He really is just a normal person.
Which is really nice to see, because often when we hear of saints, they're usually monks or nuns, and, you know, like the life of asceticism in the desert type of thing. So I know that he affected me much just by the fact that he was a priest living in the city. You know, he's married. You know, he owns a TV at home, right? So again, I'm sure he watched like good things, like pure things, like a saints movie, like you're saying. But again, you know, he was tired, so he had to, you know, change his mind watching something. Maybe he watched soccer, who knows, like, you know, right? So I think there's a beauty there, because we're able to connect with those people, and therefore sainthood is not that far-fetched anymore. I think that's a main issue that we often see today with the youth, generally speaking, with adults, like even for priests, for myself as well. I'm like, you know, I wish, and I think sometimes it's so far away, but maybe not. Like maybe, and that's very discouraging when you think it's far away, right? What do you guys think?
It's very discouraging.
Yeah.
It's very discouraging. I remember, honestly, even growing up, like I'd walk into church here, and our church is very beautiful in that it has icons all over the walls. We have the relics of the saints everywhere.
Yeah.
And I remember just growing up and feeling like the icons are put so high up in our church, but that's exactly what I felt. Like, these people are so high up. And I'd see the gold leaf. I'd see the halos. I'd see the angels descending with crowns. And like, how can I ever attain something like that? You know, so, but I think Father Mina's story was probably the very first real instance in which I felt that, no, it is achievable. I can reach it.
Yeah.
Like your reverend said, there's a holiness that I'm able to just reach out and take. I don't have to cut everything off in order for me to be a saint. You know, I don't have to go live in a desert in a cave and have a very demanding, strict prayer rule, staying up nights and days. But God is able to give holiness to everyone. It requires seriousness. And Abuna's story really proved that to me.
I love that you mentioned when you sat with Sister Mariam, and the first thing she mentions about like the whole thing is that he was a normal guy. Like, I love that that's like the first starting point. Because actually I was listening to a sermon not too long ago from a bishop, and it was also about like sainthood. And that was again like his first point. Like, the first thing you guys need to know about sainthood, that the saint is not the person who doesn't sin, it's not the person who doesn't fall, it's not the person who, you know, so I feel like it's that immediate reassurance. Because I feel, especially when we go through dry phases, that's probably devil warfare number one.
Yeah.
It's like the first tactic is to make you feel that getting back up or sainthood is like so far, so that it starts to discourage you, and then you fall into despair, and then it's a snowball effect. So it's a very refreshing and encouraging reminder that, hey, it's not that far.
And the thing is, like, I love what you said, and God is so gracious in giving us examples of people like that. People who were normal, people who have preceded us to paradise. And the fact that our church is able to produce contemporary saints, people like I'm telling you, the guy I was introduced to, he was with him the night of the martyrdom. Like, I know people who are related to him. And people who have, I remember one person told me, he's like, he met me at a wedding. And he told me, he's like, I need to tell you about the time I took communion from his hands. I was going to visit my relatives there, and this is someone we saw, someone we dealt with, someone who lived among us in our generation. He had a phone, he had a Facebook, and he's a martyr in the highest level of paradise, and yet God used him in spite of weakness, in spite of normalcy, which we think is against sainthood. You know, it's we think that being a normal person is the antithesis of holiness.
Yeah, and what's striking too is that he was young, right? You know, that really comforts me for some reason, right? So often we think of sainthood like, you know, you have this monk with this long white beard type thing, having, again, decades of spirituality, but he was so wise and so spiritual at such a young age. But I know that he wasn't always like that, though, right? Am I right? Like, I remember this from reading the book.
Oh, he was raised in a typical Coptic family. He'd go to church. He'd go to Sunday school. Everything the typical Coptic Christian would do. But there was a situation in his life where I think it was the second or third year of his preparatory school, where his father was killed in a car accident. And he actually found his comfort, his solace, his way of, his coping mechanism, if you will, was to run to the church, sit in the altar, and just pray. He would bring his Bible. As he grew up little, he'd bring his Bible and he'd just read. And I remember hearing a sermon once that said, pain is one of the most ensured ways of holiness and sanctity and sainthood. And God often puts situations like that in our lives in order to make saints out of us, in order to make us holy. And these opportunities are presented day by day, but it's us, we're the ones who refuse it. And if we're able to really harness that invitation to holiness through pain, through the cross, that Christ told us to carry and go behind him with, God is able to work wonders through us, and he's able to really use us as vessels that we've emptied ourselves, and we want to follow him regardless of what we're going through.
Yeah, I mean, often, like, when pain hits, we focus so much on it and we lose perspective, right? So, but if I realize what you just said and like gaze my eyes towards Christ himself, knowing that I'm being transformed, right? Metamorphosis, I'm being transformed into his likeness through that pain. I think it changes the way you look at it. And we tend, at least a proper Christian would hopefully tend to embrace that pain because he is seeking that saint with you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think Father Mina lived in this way?
Absolutely. And I think that invitation that he accepted early on with that pain was a prerequisite to the pain he would accept later.
Yeah, because his death was not an easy one.
It was not. It was not an easy one. And we often always hear that the death of a martyr is something that God chooses for a specific person. And I think God forged Father Mina throughout his life. And one of the things I personally learned about him was his openness and willingness to follow God wherever he wanted to take him. So he was, like I said, first nominated to the priesthood in Cairo. And what happened with his nomination to the priesthood in Sinai was, after this situation happened in Cairo, there were often invitations for him to go pray a liturgy in one of the private chapels in Cairo, and one of the bishops would often go and celebrate the liturgy in that private chapel. And it was actually the Bishop of Sinai, currently His Grace Bishop Kuzmin. So Bishop Kuzmin met Salib, got to know him, got to like him, and he really sensed in this person the willingness to follow Christ wherever he went and wherever he called. So a period of prayer followed, and then His Grace ended up calling Salib and invited him to the priesthood and asked him if he would like to serve in Sinai. Salib immediately agreed. Of course, he took a period for prayer, but he instantly agreed. And his family, actually, when they heard about this, they went crazy. His brother called him and he said, "Are you crazy?"
Why? Explain to the audience why.
Sinai at the time was a powder keg. It was a disaster of a place to live in. The Islamic fundamentalists had taken over the place to be
ISIS, right?
Yeah, ISIS, the Muslim Brotherhood. It was a place where fanaticism was rampant. So for a Christian to go there, let alone a priest, was a death sentence. So his brother called him and he said, "Wait for another nomination here."
Yeah, I just want to give an idea to the audience that just a Coptic priest in Egypt does not walk on the sidewalk on his own. Like even in Cairo, Alexandria, like that doesn't happen. So when a priest or someone is being asked to be ordained in Sinai, it's even worse. Sorry, go on.
The Bishop of Sinai, the one who came before His Grace Bishop Kuzmin, was martyred. He was the first martyr first contemporary martyr of the diocese. And Salib was asked to be a priest, a clergyman in Sinai. And he agreed. So his brother called him and told him, "Wait for a nomination here. Wait for a nomination in Cairo. You got one before, wait again." And Salib's answer to him was beautiful. He told him, "Am I going to put conditions for God? God called me to the priesthood there. I'm going to go there." Again, that openness, that willingness, that ability to have God work through the person. I'm willing for God to use me in whatever capacity He wants me in. This is what God requires. For us to desire what He desires, to look into His heart and see, "Lord, whatever it is you want, that I will do. I will forget about myself. I'll forget about my wants, my needs. Whatever it is you want, I will do." And this is what God needs. In order to work with Him, to be His true servant, He wants people who are willing to work with Him.
How was Tasuni Mariam's reaction?
She also accepted.
Instantly? Really?
She took a period of prayer, and then the bishop sat in a family setting together with the daughters, with Salib, with her, and she said, "Your Grace, we accept, and with all joy."
Wow. How old were the kids at that point?
They were young. They were probably still in elementary school.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So he got ordained on a church. Which church in Sinai?
He was actually a general priest in Sinai. So he didn't have a solidified church, but he was designated to serve the youth over there. And again, there was a period of time where he was like moving. He was praying in this church, and then he lived in a small room because it was very difficult for him to move around sometimes. And the bishop wanted him to stay close to some of the youth who would travel from Cairo to go study in Sinai. So the bishop told him, "Just stay in this room and serve the youth there." And Tasoni, Mariam, and the kids went and stayed with him in that room in order to, all of them to serve together. And Tasoni said, like, even though we were crammed, like we had a small kitchen, and Abuna would make fun, and he would say, like, the steam that would come from the cooking in the kitchen, it would fill the apartment, like we couldn't see. It was that small and it was that
Wow.
uncomfortable. But she said that period of time we spent in that room together was among the most blessed and most joyful periods of our lives, because they were being used by God. She said we'd open the door of our room and we'd find ourselves in the church. We'd be greeted by incense and the sound of the bells, like very first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
Being used by God is one of the most joyful things a person can do.
It's so beautiful when you have a wife that is willing to go through that sacrifice for the sake of God's service. It's really, really nice to see. Yeah. So tell us a bit about their service, both of them, like Abuna and Tasoni. Like Abuna gets ordained, they're serving. How was he as a priest, as a spiritual father, as a shepherd?
So, like I said, Abuna was very relatable. One of the things that always stood out about him was the fact that the youth could relate to him. And not just the youth, the congregation in general. Just for some context for the audience, in Egypt there are different dialects. So people from upper Egypt have a different dialect than people from lower Egypt. So Father Mina would sometimes switch his dialect in order to make himself more approachable, depending on where the person's from. With the youth, he'd joke and laugh and say things that would make them approach him. He would come down to their level. And I think I heard this once also from a very, very dear friend of mine. But he said, this is like a picture of the incarnation. God becoming man, coming down in order to serve. And this is the embodiment of what a priest is supposed to do. And the priest is supposed to come down to the feet of the people and serve.
Yeah, to wash their feet.
Yeah. And this is what Abuna lived on a daily basis. Even though the period of his priesthood was only 1 year and 4 months from the day he was ordained to his martyrdom, 1 year and 4 months, and yet God used him in the most amazing ways. He converted people.
That's incredible.
From Islam to Christianity. And this was one of the other reasons why he was targeted.
Yeah.
There was a situation that Tasoni told me where there was a girl who had run away from her family and was about to go marry a Muslim man. And Abuna chased after her until he brought her back. So she was speculating. She said this could have been one of the reasons why he was targeted. One of the other reasons was because he was appointed basically as the secretary of His Grace Bishop Kuzmin. So they were in each other's presence all the time. They would always be seen together. If they were driving, he would be the one driving. So it could have been as a retaliation to the church, which is why he was targeted. But his service was marked with relatability. The way people interacted with him, they couldn't forget. A lot of people have told me that we don't remember his sermons, but just the way he dealt with us as a human is something we're going to carry for the rest of our lives.
Can you give us examples of that? Do you remember any example?
I remember some of the youth telling me like he'd crack jokes with us. Like sometimes we'd just sit together.
Met those youth.
Yeah. He would sit and just joke and laugh. And if he'd ever see someone upset, like he'd wipe their tears and tell them like, save your tears for prayer.
Wow.
Save your tears for prayer.
That's so deep.
These issues you're going through, they're not worth your tears. He was deep, but he was approachable. This was something that very simple from what I've heard.
And that's actually like not just the job of the priest, but even like as servants. Like we need to meet the people where they're at. And actually it reminds me of a verse from St. Paul, to the Jew I became a Jew, to the Roman I became as a Roman, to the uncircumcised as like a non-circumcised, meet the people like where they're at and encourage them to just move just like one step up from where they're at.
Right.
And oftentimes like I know that's something like I have to work on too, is that sometimes when we speak about spiritual life to like to the youth or even in sermons and topics, whatever it is, we tend, or at least I tend to depict this like, grandiose, like very high picture of spirituality. But, I fear that sometimes maybe I can come off as again, you're depicting a picture that's way too far and way too unrelatable to the people that you're serving. So it's a good reminder for the priest and for us too.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Before we get into Father Mina's martyrdom and those details, can you give us like a backdrop of the events that would happen in Sinai, how dangerous it was for him, for other priests, for the Sunnis, for the kids? I mean, do they keep their windows and doors unlocked? Do they close? Like, how are things on a daily basis in that region?
So the period prior to Father Mina's martyrdom, like I said, Sinai and in general just the place Father Mina was a disaster. It really was. It was horrible. And Tasoni was telling me things. She said, like, we'd hear gunshots all the time. She said, actually, the eve of the martyrdom, like there was a situation where they usually sit on the balcony together. That night, they were just limited to like the steps outside of the balcony because they were afraid if someone saw them on the balcony, they'd shoot them. Molotov cocktails were being thrown left and right, burning tires everywhere. The period prior to Abuna's martyrdom, a lot of people don't know this, but there were many, many martyrs in Sinai who were laymen. So prior to Abuna's martyrdom, the situation in which a Christian found himself in was very dire and very dangerous. There's a story that comes to mind about one of the martyrs, and this was again prior to his martyrdom. But there's a story about a man named Misek Nasrallah. I love this story. This man worked in a government job. He was surrounded by Muslims, and they were peers, all of them. And one day, all of them got in a car, and they were headed somewhere. And a member of the Muslim Brotherhood blocked the car off in the road, and then looked inside and said, "Do you have any infidels in the car?" So these Muslim people, of course, they're not going to say anything. And they kind of shoved Misek and told him, "Don't open your mouth. It's okay. Just stay quiet." But he looked outside to the man and he said, "I'm a Christian." He didn't even choose to stay silent.
Oh.
They told him, "Don't talk, don't talk."
Yeah.
They pulled him out of the car and they confirmed he was a Christian. He said, "I'm a Christian. I will die as a Christian." And they told him, "You don't deserve to live." And they shot him across the length of his body and killed him.
Oh, wow.
So there are many, many similar stories. People being beheaded and left in front of their homes and in front of the church. The state of the Christian in Sinai at the time was horrible. Tasuni would tell me priests would be walking down the street and they'd be stopped. They'd be threatened.
Yeah.
Their cassocks would be covered in spit from top to bottom.
Yeah, that's standard. Yeah.
It was horrible.
I mean, we also want to clarify, like, I love that story because, like, you mentioned how, like, many Muslims there in the car were actually trying to live a good life, right? Protect their Christian brother, right? But the extremists are the ones that, do this type of thing, right? So it's very, very unfortunate. It reminds me at some point I was like I know this is really off tangent, but it's a tangent. I was in Upper Egypt as well, in a different city, and like I was really concerned about something, not to go, like, for a long time on those details. And I was sitting next to this guy, and he was working in Libya, actually, before the 21 martyrs, a couple of years prior to the martyrs. Yeah. In short, I'm not going to say the whole story because it's a bit long, but I just want to target like a specific point. He would tell me that they knew where the Christians were, like they owned specific stores or rented stores there. And they would step into the store and tell the person, "Are you Christian?" And if he answers yes, they put a bag on his head, right? Grab him and shove him in the truck, right? And then they would ask the guy next to him, "Are you Christian?"
Wow.
Yeah, that's the part that is like incredible, right? Of course, some denied, but some said, "Yes, I am Christian." And I found it like it's so courageous for them to actually go through this. You know what's about to happen, like in your story. And you go ahead and respond, yes, I am Christian. I am willing to die for my Christ. Anyways, they picked him and 50 other people, and they were like savagely beaten for 5 days until a miracle happened, and then they were saved and went back to Egypt. Yeah, it was 2 years prior to the 21 martyrs, so it was something that was happening there bit by bit. Anyways, sorry for
no,
cut
it's
you off.
okay.
Yeah,
It's okay.
I just the courage of those martyrs is beyond.
Of course, yeah.
So you're saying that it was a dangerous time in that area. Tell us a bit more about Father Mina himself. Like, what led to his martyrdom?
So, Father Mina was starting to receive death threats, and many of them were targeted to him specifically. So, one night, he and Father Raphael, these two priests were ordained on the same day, Father Mina, Father Raphael, and they were sitting together with their wives one evening, and Father Mina candidly said, I'm starting to receive death threats. So there were messages on his phone, voicemails that were left from unknown numbers of people who would curse him, curse his priesthood, curse his Christianity, and threaten to kill him. And like I said, a lot of the priests were getting calls like these, threats like these, people leaving them voicemails telling them, like, if you're a man, come meet me in the street. And it was very scary. And but many of these death threats were directed to him specifically. Again, being his place as a secretary to His Grace, possibly his interactions with some of the youth that he ended up rescuing, the lost sheep that he ended up returning. Many of these people, because of their saving at the hands of Father Mina was targeted. Now, I think the timeline of his martyrdom, about 2 weeks prior, he was on a trip to Cairo, and then he was returning with his family in the car. So it was Father Mina, his wife, Sister Mariam, his two daughters, Verena and Justina, and Sister Mariam's sister. So they were in the car together, and they were driving past a city near Sinai called Bir al-Abd. And Sister Mariam was telling me, she said the road in that city was horrible. There's ups and downs, and the roads were uneven. And she was laughing when she was telling me this, but she's like, me and Abuna always argued as to how fast he was going that night. But he was going at a very high speed. And with these inclines, the speed wasn't helping, so he would like go up in the air and then come down.
Okay, it's not just fast.
Yeah. No, he's flying.
like I thought you meant he was we all bust the speed limit. But like,
So he really was normal.
Yeah.
we don't become airborne.
So he was airborne.
And not in an Anchorite
He
style,
like casually says, "Oh yeah, he was just speeding a little bit," but he like go up in the air, come back down. Okay.
So on one of the instances where he was airborne, he saw an elderly man standing in the middle of the street and bent over a cane, and he was staring directly into the windshield, looking at Father Mina. And he was just looking and staring. And Father Mina said, I'm going to kill this guy. So he swerved, he tried everything. The car ended up losing control and ended up veering off into the desert on the side of the road, and they collided with a metal pipeline face first. People started surrounding the car, thinking that they were going to start to remove the lifeless bodies of the people in the car. Everyone came out without a scratch. Father Mina took off his seatbelt, came out of the car. His first instinct, his first thought was, where's the guy that I was about to kill? And he looked for him everywhere.
He didn't look for his wife or his kids?
I mean, they were with him.
Yeah, okay.
But his first thought was like, where is this person? And he disappeared into thin air. Even he started asking the people around, did you guys see the guy in the middle of the road? No one saw him.
Really?
Abuna did, his wife did, the girls did. Everyone in the car saw him. And they were all screaming. They were calling on the names of the saints. And Abuna lost control of the car because of it. But no one else saw this person. So Abuna was taken back to the apartment that night. And he was just sitting on the couch, just like this. Like wide-eyed, speechless, unable to utter a word. And Tassoni sat next to him to comfort him. And he told her, Maryam, where would we have gone if we had actually died tonight? And she was very confident. She told me, she's like, I told him we'd go to heaven, of course. So he chuckled like that too. He said, you're so confident. And then he looked at her. He said, I think God has given me this as an opportunity to prepare myself. And throughout those 2 weeks, she told me he had completely changed. Many times after service, he'd come back, sit with the girls, and, sometimes they'd watch some TV, they'd have dinner. After service, now, he would come back to his room, shut the door, and read the Bible for hours. People would come visit him at the house, and he'd constantly say, God gave me this as an opportunity to prepare myself. Prior to this, I want to touch on something else, because he did have premonitions of his impending martyrdom. There was an instance where it was the first anniversary of his priesthood, so he'd be martyred 4 months after that. So they wanted to celebrate the anniversary, so they went out to a park, like a public park, and people were taking pictures and videos to capture the memories. So one person took a video of Father Mina and told him, Abuna, what do you wish for this new year of priesthood? And he said very beautiful things. He wished some very beautiful wishes for Maryam and the girls. And then he said, but as for me, I love the litany of the 11th hour of the Agbeya, where we pray and we speak to Saint Mary and we tell her, and when my soul departs, my body attend to me, and defeat the conspiracy of the enemies and shut the gates of Hades, lest they might swallow my soul. So this answer seemed so bizarre, random. But 4 months later, and we'll delve into that in the martyrdom itself, but 4 months later, it was a misconception that was proven to be true. The fact that this was random, it wasn't random. His wish came true, and we're going to touch on that. But again, many things had happened where he would tell people things like, this is the last time you're going to see me. The night of the martyrdom, as I explained before, they usually have a habit, Abuna and his wife, of sitting outside on the balcony and just enjoying 2 cups of tea. But because of the situation, the revolution that was happening at the time, and
Which year was this?
This was 2013. So this specific event happened July 5th, 2013, where they were sitting on the balcony, or outside of the balcony, and they were hearing gunshots left and right, but they were trying to make use of what they had.
And what's this revolution, do you know?
So at the time, they ousted President Mohamed Morsi. Mohamed Morsi was a member of the Muslim Brotherhood, yes. And it was when they ousted him and the government ended up taking over, the Muslim Brotherhood retaliated. I don't know if Your Reverence remembers, I think they burned 70 or 80 churches in a single day. The burning of the churches happened a couple of weeks after Father Mina's martyrdom, but this was the situation of Egypt at the time. It was a mess. Many people were martyred. Many people died for the name of Christ. But because of the situation, they were seated outside of the balcony, and at the time, they were stationing soldiers outside of the churches in case there was an attack that was going to happen. So Father Mina got a phone call. It was around 8 o'clock at night. And he ended up telling the person on the other line, okay, I'll be there right away. So Maryam looks at him. She's like, where are you going? And he said they pulled the soldiers from the church. The church is now it's not guarded. So I'm going to go guard the church. So she told him, "Are you crazy? Like, do you hear the gunshots going on? Where are you going to go now?" So they ended up fighting. And she told me, she's like, "We fought." And one of the servants living in the apartment below them heard them fighting. So he went upstairs to see what was going on. So Maryam explained to the servant, "Abuna wants to leave right now." And she was getting ready. She was like, I'll come with you. If you go, I'll come with you." And he's like, "Okay, who's going to stay with the kids?" So again, normal. They're fighting. Normal people.
Yeah.
So this servant says, "Maryam, stay behind. If it makes you feel any better, I'll go with Abuna. We'll go to the church together. I'll make sure he's okay." And she's like, "Please take care of him." So they leave every couple, maybe every 30 minutes or something. She'd call him, "Are you okay?" And then at one point he just told her like, "Oh, I'm sitting outside of the church in this, in like the wooden booth that the soldiers used to sit in. Like, I'm sitting in there now. I'm guarding the church." And she's like, "Abuna, please go inside the church, close the metal gate behind you," because it was, people were throwing, like I said, Molotov cocktails at the church, and he was outside. So he said, "What am I gonna do? Am I gonna be afraid, Maryam?" And she mentioned this to me. She told me Abuna was sometimes a fearful person. Sometimes he panicked, sometimes he was apprehensive. But in those 2 weeks, I saw his mentality towards fear completely change. Where many times he'd tell me, like, "إحنا هنخاف يا مريم," like, "Are we going to be afraid, Maryam?" Like, "No, I need to guard the church. The men are all outside guarding the church. Am I going to leave them and tell them, no, I'm too scared to go. I'm going to stay." So she ended up writing a post on Facebook, and she said, "Everyone, please pray for Father Mina because he's guarding St. Mina's church." And that prompted many of Abuna's relatives to call him, to check on him. To many of those relatives, that would be the last time they would hear his voice. And what happened was, again, one of the premonitions, he was sitting with the youth that night. And this was the night that youth who introduced me to Tassoni, he was with them that night of the martyrdom. And Abuna Mina was sitting with the youth, and they started to hear the Molotov cocktails start to be thrown at the church. And the bottles just breaking, and the fire and the heat. And so one of the girls had a panic attack. And Abuna was comforting her and telling her, like, "You're foolish. Like, don't you know that it's just a couple bullets and you'll end up in heaven as a martyr?" And Tassoni Maryam was commenting, and she was telling me, she's like, "Why did he mention bullets? Why didn't he mention the Molotov cocktails? Why didn't he mention the sword? Why bullets?" So she said he had a feeling God had put it in his heart. And that night he was sermonizing to the youth, giving them homilies about martyrdom, giving them talks about the glory that awaits a martyr in heaven, the things that would happen to the body of a martyr that ended up happening to him. Things that were fulfilled in Father Mina later on. So he ended up finishing that night. He went back to the apartment. Tassoni Maryam welcomed him, and she embraced him. And Abuna told her, "I want to sleep by myself tonight." So he went to the room where Verena and Justina were sleeping. They slept on like 2 twin beds. And he just slept on the ground in between the beds. So she slept in her room, in the master bedroom, alone that night. So she woke up in the morning. She remembered that she had slept alone. So she walked out of the room to check on him. And she heard him talking, just little whispers. So she thought he was taking a phone call. But when she looked outside, she was very delicate in her footsteps so that he wouldn't notice. But when she looked outside, she saw that the phone wasn't to his ear. He wasn't taking a phone call. He was talking. She assumed he was praying. But she told me, she said, this was not the way Father Mina usually prays. He would speak and then listen. And then he would counter and then listen again. And then he would nod. And then he would smile. And then tears would well up in his eyes.
Oh.
She told me there was a two-way dialogue happening in front of my eyes. And finally, he ended up saying things, please take care of the girls.
Hmm.
Tab, what about this? What about this? Lord, what should I do with this? So
you mentioned Lord.
she came to the conclusion that he was having a dialogue with our Lord Jesus Christ himself before going out of the house the day of his martyrdom. Finally, he noticed that she was there, so he pretended like nothing was happening. He stood up and he looked at his watch, and it was time to leave. I think it was around 8:30 in the morning. And he stood up and it was time to start the day. So she told him, where are you planning on going? Because I'm seriously worried about you. She told me I don't usually ask him that question, and he doesn't like it when I ask him that question. So he said, I'm going to go to the mechanic because they're still fixing the car. And then he stopped and he lingered and he looked into her eyes. And she told me, in all of our years of marriage, he never looked at me that way. And she had all of these questions that were on her mind that she couldn't get out of herself. She was saying, like, she said, are you saying goodbye? Like, is this farewell? Why are you looking at me like this? Do you want me to come with you? All of these questions were in her mind, but the only thing she could possibly say was, okay, God be with you. She did actually want to leave that morning with him, but she said, I had a sudden wave of fatigue come over me, and I couldn't leave the house. And then I had like thoughts like, oh, I have chores I need to do. She later found out that this wave of fatigue was God-given. So she tells him, okay, God be with you. He's about to walk out of the house. The girls hear that he's leaving, so they come out and greet him. And as he's leaving the house, he's going down the stairs. And then one of his daughters notices that he leaves his phone on the dinner table. So she runs after him. She says, Dad, your phone. You left your phone. So he shoos her away as if to tell her, I don't need it. So Mariam at the time, she saw this. She's like, what's happening? A priest's phone never leaves him. I'm like, Aboud, I'm sure you can relate.
Yeah.
Like,
Definitely.
yeah. She said, a priest's phone never leaves him. What's happening? So he left it. And then he went and started the day. So the martyrdom itself, he was driving back home. And there was...
Sorry, this was after the mechanic?
Yeah. And this was after the mechanic.
No, so this is before the mechanic, right? Like when he's leaving the house.
He had finished at the mechanic and he's on his way home.
That's when he gets martyred.
Yeah.
Okay. But all what you just said about the phone and stuff, this was
before.
The mechanic.
Before he started the day.
It was just, I don't know, it's maybe a funny detail to stand out to me, but it's like, you're about to be martyred, but you're still going about your day like everything's normal. Like you're going to the mechanic because the car obviously has to be taken care of. But
yes,
you know what? It's like do not disrupt the events of the day. It just stood out to me.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
But
I never thought of that.
Sorry, I don't know. Keep going, but
I'm sure. I think it's part of the story, I guess.
Yeah. So he was on his way back home. And what happened is he was driving down the road, and then a motorcycle started catching up. And then I think it was a truck came behind, and the motorcycle started pressuring Aboud to go to the median, to go to the side of the road. He was trapping him, basically. And the person in the car went around and lowered his window and then aimed a fully automatic gun at the car and shot all over the car. One bullet ended up going through the door and piercing Aboud's thigh. So he couldn't move. He couldn't move his leg, so he couldn't reverse. He couldn't push the gas. He couldn't escape. He was basically trapped. So the person on the motorcycle ended up dismounting, forced the door of the car open, and then pulled Aboud by the collar of his cassock and pulled him out of the car and dragged him across the pavement. And at this point, his blood is seeping, so it's causing the pavement to be filled with blood. And the other assailants were around him, and they were sneering and telling him, stand up. So he tried to stand up on his injured leg, and they'd kick him down again. And at every single attempt, they'd kick him down. And then they would step on his chest. And they ended up discovering when they, at the autopsy, they found a shoe print aggressively pushed into the skin above his heart.
Really?
It was to that extent.
Wow.
They used the cross around his neck as a makeshift noose, and put it around his neck, and they pulled him to the extent that the skin of his neck began to tear. And they pulled his cassock to the extent, Tassoni was explaining to me, she said, if you saw his cassock the day of, that he wore the day of the martyrdom, all the buttons are splayed. They're all popped off because of the anger that they pulled him with. So finally they stood him up, and then one of them looked into his eyes and told him, say the Shahada, the Muslim profession of faith. And Abuna couldn't articulate a confession of the faith, so he shook his head. So he said again, say the Shahada and I'll have mercy on you. And Abuna looked him in the eyes and told him, may God have mercy on me and you. So the man heard this, he couldn't contain himself any longer. He shot Father Mina 9 times along the length of his body. One of the bullets entered right under his ear and into his mouth, and it ended up shattering all of his teeth, and his teeth were scattered all over the ground. The reason, I know this is graphic, but the reason why I'm explaining this is because God would use these teeth, which were collected as relics, as the conduits to some of the most amazing miracles later on. So they shot him 9 times along the length of his body, and they left him to die. So this was near the church. So one of the servants in the church, his name was Mina actually, but he heard the gunshots. He went out and looked, and he saw Father Mina laying in the road. So he ran to him, and he picked up Abuna's head, put it in his lap, and Abuna was between life and death at this point. And then all of a sudden, Abuna's eyes go wide open, and then he looks, and he starts saying, "O Virgin, O Virgin." So this wish that he had on the first anniversary of his priesthood, where he told the Holy Virgin, when the time of my death comes, attend to me. When my spirit departs my body, attend to me. So she came.
Yeah.
She came to take him.
Of course she came.
She came. And his arms had given out, and he was giving up his last breaths. He was praying in the last moments. He had not died immediately. So he was truly being tortured. Those moments before his death were torturous. And he delivered his soul up. It was around noon on July 6, 2013.
It's been 12 years already. Wow. It's incredible. Do you think he knew all those details?
Which details?
Yeah, like how he would be martyred, like in that level of detail?
I mean, so he had, like I said, he had an idea about the whole bullets thing.
Yes, true.
But even Tassoni was telling me, like, there were some instances where he would say things about martyrdom that were... The last sermon he ever gave, she showed me his handwritten notes. And he said, God counts every drop, every tear of ours, and every drop of blood, and rewards us for them 1,000-fold in the kingdom of heaven. Why would he say blood?
Yeah.
The sermon, I think, was about you are more valuable than many sparrows. But he tied it into martyrdom for one reason or another.
Yeah.
And he had a feeling, God had put it in his heart that he was going to be martyred.
It's just an incredible story. Yeah. There's no way someone can hear this and not fall in love with Father Mina. Yeah.
And actually, I don't know, something that spoke very powerfully to me, it's, you know, when he mentioned the litany of Vespers, and then it actually came to life. It's like, we pray this every day.
Yeah.
And like this isn't words in the air.
They're not empty prayers.
No. And again, I actually it called to mind again another sermon I had heard from a bishop, and he's saying, hey, when you pray this, like, you're making a deal with Saint Mary that
Yeah.
when I leave, like, you're gonna be there. So it's just, I mean, I already have like a love for Egbe, but this is like a whole newfound respect for these words that are inspired by the Holy Spirit, you know, and they're real.
And actually, we don't have to look very far. It even happened in the diocese here when like there's a lady, again, making a long story short, a lady was in the hospital and she was crying, and our bishop actually went to see her and told her why all the crying and whatnot, and this is the Agbeya, you know, pray it and pray that part. And the next day, before she passed away, she was seeing Saint Mary and she was uttering, you know, "O Virgin Mary," like, because of that prayer. So it's not, doesn't only happen in Egypt, right? It happens all over the place. Saint Mary is there. She appears. These prayers are real. And we have to, you know, really encounter the Agbeya, the Bible, like all of our Christian life, essentially, you know, realizing that it's true. You know, sometimes it saddens me, you know, like, the last will be first, the first will be last. We all know that verse by heart, right? But how do we live our lives, you know? If we understood that truly, like, the servant of all will be first, right? I would rush to serve and wash the feet of others, right? This is what we would do.
Right.
And I really pray for myself and, you know, for everyone that we really seek that life seriously.
And actually, about seeking that life, and to just piggyback on what you're saying, and this all will also tie into, like, you know, the embracing pain. You know, sometimes I feel like there might be like the stereotype where, like, oh yeah, the Copts and, you know, like martyrdom, and they're all about pain and crying and beating the chest, and it's all like depressing. But the idea, it's that embracing pain, it's not embracing pain for the sake of embracing pain. It's about the focus. It's being close to Christ.
Yeah.
That's it. At whatever cost. If the cost of that is like comfort, and we live, you know, like a nice life, but it's like within close to Christ, then sure. If it's martyrdom, sure. If it's whatever it is, it's close to Christ, because really, sometimes we over fixate on like the problem or the tribulation or the pain, and then it kind of clouds the vision between us and Christ. But really, the only problem that faces all of humanity is distance from Christ, and the solution to all problems is closeness to Christ.
Yeah.
You know,
and we see it often, right? When people are doing well, they do take a step backwards, right, from Christ Himself. Unfortunately, it's a common thing, right? And I think to want to be close to God, even in the good days, in the good times, it what makes a Christian, right? But anyways, not to take too much time on that and go back to Father Mina's story. So as Christians, we do know that, you know, this life on earth is only the beginning. So on that day, Father Mina Aboud was really born for real into the completeness and fullness of humanity in his Lord, right? So obviously he's not dead. He's even more so alive. So there's plenty of miracles that have happened since. But before we speak about the miracles, and maybe you can share a few, maybe let's focus with Tasoni, like Miriam herself. Did she encounter him after he departed from this earth? Can you give us a bit of detail?
Many times.
Tell us. I can't wait. Tell us. Yeah.
A lot of the instances were moments where I was actually very gracious that she shared with me some of these instances. But she told me that in the beginning he would come to her a lot. He would visit her many times. But as time passed, this is an instance that just came to mind out of many, but as time passed, he would seem a little distant. And she ended up actually consulting Tasoni Angel, the wife of Father Bishoy Kemed, who was recently canonized in the church.
Yes.
And she told him, she told Tasoni Angel, Abuna Mina like stopped visiting me. Did I do something wrong? Am I did I upset him? And Tasoni said something that was so beautiful. So she said, Abuna Bishoy also used to visit me, but when they start to serve after their departure, because we think sometimes that when they depart, they're separated from us. But this is when their true service starts. So when they need to focus on their service, when they see that we're toughened up and good, and we don't need that visit anymore, they start to focus on serving all men. So she comforted her. She told her, maybe Abuna, it's time for Abuna to start serving. So he visited you to strengthen you, to comfort you, but now it's time for him to serve. So she took comfort in those words, and one night...
So just for the sake of the audience, what do you mean by serve? Can you...
serving the people of God through, whether it be through praying for them, interceding for them before the throne, whether it be through helping them if God grants that they would perform miracles, things like that.
Thank you.
And actually, sorry, just because you mentioned Sonia and Jill, because actually, as you were speaking, I was thinking of her, because I remember there was an interview with her, and then they asked her, how did you feel after Abu Nabshoy passed away? And did you feel that he's still present with you? And I was expecting an answer yeah, of course I feel him, and he's still with me. But her answer kind of threw me off guard. She's like, he takes care of me more now than he did when he was alive.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. I was like, what? What on? Can you imagine that it could come to that point where you actually feel his presence more after he passes away than when he was there in the flesh? That to me really struck me.
Yeah. And actually Tasoni Mariam shared the same sentiment, but there were times that she missed him, so this was one of those instances where she said it was Abu Namina's birthday, and one night she just stood in prayer and she said, Lord, I really want to see him. It's his birthday today. I really want to see my husband. I really just want to wish him happy birthday. She really wished to see him. So he came to her that night, and the first thing he told her, he said, are you still whining like you used to? You're still whining. And she said, what am I supposed to do? I miss you. I want to see you. So he ended up explaining to her. He said, I'm serving now. God is using me for service. I can't come visit you as often as I did before. So, and she would tell me every single time he comes, he'd greet her with the words, I'm alive. What your reverend said, that the saints are not dead once they leave the earth. They're more alive than they were here.
Yeah.
So he would greet her with the same words, I'm alive. And many, many more instances of visitations, of his visits to her in order to comfort her. Many situations come to mind. When you said that he's more present, and I feel his presence even more than when he was here on earth. I remember Tasoni told me a story once about how she was super sick. She had this massive headache, and she couldn't beat it. She took medication, she took everything, and she picked up his picture, and she said, my love, if you were here, I know you would have taken me to the doctor. She couldn't move, she couldn't take herself to the doctor. And then she explained that all of a sudden, she felt a hand. She didn't see it, but she felt a hand being placed on her head, on top of her veil, and power running through her body. And then all of a sudden, the headache's gone. And she removed the veil and she smelled it, and it smelled like incense. It smelled like fragrance. And this was something that marked Father Mina, this smell of incense and fragrance. It's the same smell of in the Coptic church, honut, the fragrance.
Most saints actually, most saints when they appear, they have that smell. The smells change, they vary a bit, but it's a constant thing when they appear. Yeah.
There are so many miracles that happened after his martyrdom. I think his martyrdom is something, but the events after his martyrdom is an incredible testament to the work of God in the church and the work of God in his people.
Yeah.
On the topic of incense, fragrance, hanut, there was an instance where immediately after the martyrdom, they had moved Father Mina's body. They had flown him to Cairo because obviously they couldn't pray the funeral there because of the situation. So they had flown his body to Cairo. And they put his body in a private hall for his family to take his blessings and grieve. So his mother had arrived into the church. And this was her first time seeing her son. So she stood over his body. She started weeping and she told him, "You left me. Who am I supposed to go to now?" And I guess Abuna wished to empathize with her. So they started to notice that his body, his eyes started to weep. And this was 3 days after his martyrdom. He started to weep. They saw successive tears fall down his face. And people noticed, so they took tissues and started wiping. And when they came to smell the tissues, they found it to smell like fragrance. They found it to smell like incense.
And this is not uncommon in the church. You know, I mean, when you go to Upper Egypt, for example, in Akhmim, thank you, like the monastery in Akhmim, like the martyrs of Akhmim.
Right.
Right? Yeah, I'm sure if you've been before, right? The skull that is still growing hair, and like I've heard so many stories there, and the fingernails, as well, that are still growing. And I heard this very, very scary story that I won't share online, but maybe in private after I can share.
I think I know the one you're talking about.
Oh yeah, did I? Is it a baby? And oh yeah, isn't that scary? Yeah. Anyways, but I mean, it's something that it's common. Well, quote unquote common. I mean, when it comes to miracles and whatnot. So if someone from the audience is hearing this and thinks that no, this can't be real, actually it is real. Like it happens.
There are
often.
pictures. I actually included a picture in the book. Someone took a picture of the tears glistening on his face. And this is his body in the casket 3 days later. And his brother actually commented, he said, medically speaking, the eye is one of the first things to desiccate. And so for him to produce tears, let alone tears that smell like incense, is impossible.
Yeah. No, agreed. Well, it's not impossible since it happened, but naturally speaking, it's impossible.
It's just crazy to think that, like after, even when he appears to Sonia, and then he says, I have to start serving now. And then he starts to serve and the miracles and the works and stuff. And then you think that all of this came from, like a martyrdom that lasted maybe how long?
A couple of minutes.
Yeah.
Like the Psalm says, weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Like the pain, the suffering, it's all temporary, and it's nothing in comparison, like St. Paul says. Yeah. I do not consider the pains of this world worthy to be compared with the glory that will be revealed in us after.
Absolutely.
So earlier in the story, you mentioned his teeth.
So I love this story. So Tassoni was telling me that Father Raphael had one day came to her apartment and brought a bag full of the shattered teeth that were gathered from the road after the martyrdom. He actually brought 2 bags. He brought the bag of the teeth, and then he brought a bag of a mixture of sand and blood that was left behind. So he brought it to the apartment, and he wanted to give Sister Mariam part of the teeth as a blessing. And he also left a piece for his mom, for Father Mina's mom. So he brought a tube, and a wooden tube. For our viewers who don't know, in the Coptic Church, we put our relics in a wooden tube, which symbolizes the wood of the cross. And when we come to anoint the relics, we anoint them with a mixture of spices and flowers in order to compare them to the suffering of the saints that are crushed. And we mix them with this fragrant oil in order to compare them to the fragrant aroma of Christ that comes as a byproduct of their suffering. So that's, again, a little tangent, but Father Raphael put the piece of the teeth inside the tube and sealed it shut, and he said, no one is allowed to open this. If anyone wants to take the blessing, they may take a blessing from the outside. Tassoni actually mentions, he said, before he put the teeth inside the tube, we were looking for a little plastic bag to put just this little tiny piece. And we couldn't find one. But she said this was all according to God's plan. They found a couple of tissues, they wrapped it in, and they put it inside. So a couple of months later, one of the priests in Cairo had visited her and asked for a small particle of his relics in order to take to his church as a blessing to the congregation. So she agreed, so she opened the tube, and the second she opened the tube, the entire apartment filled with this aroma of fragrance. And they all started singing the hymn Worthy, Oxios. And when they came to pull the tooth that was wrapped in the tissue, they found that the tooth itself started seeping blood and had soaked the tissue that it was in. And it looked, she described, she told me it seemed like the blood had only trickled hours before. It was fresh blood.
Mm.
And this was like a piece of tooth, like it didn't have anything. And it
You're a
wasn't like,
dentist, aren't you?
I'm a dentist,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
like a piece of enamel does not have any nothing in it, you know. So she ended up telling this story later on to his Grace Bishop Kozman. He came to visit her, and he said, "Show me." So they opened the tube. He found the tissues. He folded it up. He put it in his pocket. He's like, "Thank you." So she was very upset. She said, "You know, he took the blessing from me, but." She's so great. She told me, my love did not leave me upset. So she folded it up in a new tissue, and then later on in the future, someone else came asking for a blessing from his relic. So she opened it up, and she said that the tooth started seeping even more blood than it had previously. Now, before I forget, I mentioned Father Raphael. I do want to give him his due.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, Father Raphael Musa was ordained a priest the same day as Father Mina. His story is ridiculous.
We're waiting for the book.
I really hope so. I really hope so soon. Keep me in your prayers.
Will do.
But I actually didn't include this part in the book, but Father Raphael, immediately after his wedding, he told his wife, so he was ordained a priest. He was older. He was not as young as Father Mina. I think he was in his 50s, maybe 60s, when he was ordained a priest. So many years prior, right after his wedding, he told his wife, "God revealed to me two things, and don't ask me how I know or how he revealed it to me, but he revealed to me two things. The first thing is that I'm going to be ordained a priest. The second thing is that I'm going to die as a martyr." So fast forward, Father Raphael, prior to anything, he knew he was going to be a priest and he was going to be a martyr. So one day he came over to Tassoni Mariam's apartment in order to offer his condolences for Father Mina's martyrdom. So she told me, he pulled me to the side and he said, "What I'm about to utter to you, I need you to consider like they're words of confession. Don't tell anyone until later." So she nodded. She told him to proceed. And he told her, "What happened to Father Mina is going to happen to me exactly. I'm going to die the same death as Father Mina." So she looked at him. She thought he was joking. She thought this was like some weird way of him trying to empathize with her. But she realized he was serious.
That's some dark humor.
Very dark.
Yeah. It's a joke.
So he's talking to the Tassoni Mariam,
To Tassoni Mariam,
the wife of Father Mina.
to the wife of Father Mina. And he told her, "I'm going to die the same death that your husband died." And she immediately she burst out. She's like, "Abuna, don't say that. Like, may God give you a long life." And he looked at her and he smiled and he said, "You'll see, and you'll say Father Raphael said so." So 3 years later, almost to the day, on June 30th, 2016, Father Raphael was out of the house, and an ISIS militant snuck behind him. He was stalking him for the whole day, but he snuck behind him, and he ended up pulling out a gun. He fired one shot into his shoulder, and Father Raphael yelled, he said, "Oh Lord." And then the second shot, he shot on the back of his head. So Father Raphael fell to the ground in the form of a cross. He stretched his arms out, and he gained the crown of martyrdom like Father Mina. But again, there were many instances prior to that. I think he also had a visitation from Christ. his wife saw a vision the night of the martyrdom.
Oh yeah.
But she's very private, unfortunately. She doesn't like to share too much.
Yeah.
But the saints are alive in our church.
Absolutely.
The saints are alive, and they're here among us, and we're able to be like them.
Yeah. I also heard of that story. I mean, I think someone in the States that you knew, she had something behind her eye or something. Is that something you can share? Or?
Sure.
Yeah.
I have this one, and then I have a miracle that I actually heard maybe 2 hours before coming here.
No way.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Just in time.
Yeah, just in time.
Yeah.
So there was this girl that I knew. So I had started dental school in 2019, and the school I went to had many Coptic Orthodox students, and in different medical fields. So some were in medicine, others were in pharmacy, others were in optometry. I was in dentistry. So in total, all of us, the Egyptians, we were maybe like 40 people. Okay. So what happened was I got the idea to gather all of these people. We said, let's do something together. Let's get together, pray the midnight praises in someone's apartment. We'll pray together. We'll sing some spiritual songs, and then we'll have like a potluck or have fun or whatever. I forgot to mention that the visit I had with Tasoni, where she told me Father Mina's story, she was very gracious enough to give me part of Abuna's relics. So, and it comprised of part of his clothes, the day of the martyrdom, and it's soaked in his blood. So, and she told me, she's like, you have to put it in a tube. So I told her, okay. And I took permission from one of the bishops. He gave me absolution, so I have it with me. So when I moved out into my apartment, I took the relics with me to my apartment. So I had some of my Egyptian friends coming over, and they'd walk into the apartment past my room, and they'd see this reliquary tube with a picture of this young priest. And they'd be like, who is that? Like, we're not used to seeing a picture of a photograph on like the relics like this. Usually it's like St. George, St. Mina. But to see a young priest, it was very strange for them. So I told them, I need to sit down and I need to tell you everything. Because this was just a couple weeks after visiting Egypt. So everything was still fresh in my mind. So we had organized this group of youth in one of the apartments. We were praying the midnight praises. And they actually told me beforehand, they said, bring the relics with you. This would be a perfect opportunity for you to tell us about this priest whose story you just heard. So we prayed the midnight praises that night. And if you ask any person who was there, they would tell you that with Abuna's presence with us, it felt like we were praying in heaven. There was something strange about, I don't want to say strange, but something abnormal about that night that made us feel like Abuna was standing among us, praising with us. Abuna loved to praise. We didn't really touch on this, but he was in love with hymns. And we really did feel like he was there. So we sat down, and one of the youth told me, like, okay, who is this guy? So I ended up talking to them for about 2.5 hours about everything I heard in Egypt. And they instantly fell in love with him.
Of course.
They fell in love with Father Mina. And later that night, when we all kind of dispersed and people were talking and people were cooking in the kitchen and everyone was all over the place, one of the girls came up to me and she said, I have a favor to ask. Is it okay if I take the relics and go into one of the rooms and just pray with it for just 5 minutes? I said, sure, yeah, of course, go for it. So I gave her the relics. She went inside one of the rooms. I honestly forgot about it for like a couple minutes. She came out and I noticed she was crying. Like I could tell on her face that, like, you know, the makeup was smeared, you know, the eyes were puffy. So I wanted to comfort her somehow. So what I did was I had just one remaining picture of Father Mina that Tasoni Mariam had given me in Egypt. So it was my last one, but I said, you know what? I'll give it to her. I have the relics anyways. So I gave it to her. She was so happy with it. So this was a Friday night.
And I have the relics anyways. I love that. Yeah, it's hilarious.
But she took the picture. She went home that night. It was a Friday night. So Monday came around. So this was just a couple days later. I'm back on campus. and I'm walking to youth meeting. One of our fathers, the priest, he gives the youth meeting on campus to us. So one of the girls, she caught up to me in the parking lot on the way to the youth meeting, and she told me, "Did you hear that Abuna Mina did a miracle with so-and-so?" So I said, "No, I didn't hear." She said, "Okay, I think she's waiting to see you, for her to tell you herself." So after the youth meeting, I see her from far, and I'm like, "Come here. You have something you need to tell me, don't you?" She's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Okay, let's go for a walk. Tell me what happened." So she is an optometry student. So she was in her second year. So she's explaining to me, she said, "We just started lab where we're supposed to do exams on each other. We're paired up as students, and we're supposed to do exams on each other and look in each other's eyes." So one of my classmates was paired with me, and then we're doing the exam. She looks in my eye, and then immediately she backs away. She calls one of our professors over, and he looks in my eye, and he says, "You have a tumor in your eye." He's like, "Did you know that you had that?" She's like, "No, absolutely not." He's like, "You need to go to a specialist like today." So she tells me, she's like, "I booked an appointment with a specialist. He looked in my eye, and she's like, I can tell he was trying to hide his anxiousness. He was trying to make it seem like everything was okay, but I could tell he saw something he didn't like." So he told me, he's like, "Okay, we're going to schedule a follow-up in a couple of weeks. We'll see how it progresses." So she told me, I went in for the follow-up, and this lump, this tumor, started growing to the extent that it started pushing on some of the things in my eye. And he said, we need to excise it, we need to remove it, but there is a risk you're going to lose that eye. So she, of course, was distraught. She's from Canada. She's about to start her career. Yeah. Her family's here in Canada, and she's in the US, so she's alone, and she's dealing with all of this on her own. So she told me, we prayed the midnight praises at the apartment, and when you gave me the relics, I went inside the room, and I just put it on my face, and I told Father Mina, I'm not going to ask anything of you. The only thing I'm going to ask is just put your hand on my eye. Just put your hand on my eye. And then when I came out and you gave me the picture, I went back home that night and I put the picture on my eye and I wrapped it up in gauze and I fell asleep. And then she said, Monday came around. So she's telling me this Monday evening. So Monday morning, she was in lab again. And she told me, I felt like something was different. I felt like something was off, but I couldn't tell what it was. So she was paired up with another student. And she told the student, can you look inside my eye and see if you see anything abnormal? So she's like, okay. So she looks in her eye, and then she's like, no, I don't really see anything. Wait, no, I'm looking in the wrong view. So who's passing by? The professor. The same professor. So he hears this and he's like, no, you're looking in the right view. Move. So he pushes the girl to the side. He looks inside her eye and he says, where's the tumor? Oh. And he starts to panic. He's like, where is it? Where is it? And like, did you get the surgery? You didn't miss school. Where is the tumor? And at this point, she starts to weep. She explains the story. She says it in front of all her classmates. They start to cry. Really? Yeah. Wow. They start to cry. The professor ends up patting her on the shoulder and telling her, I'm telling you, there's nothing there. It's gone. Wow. So she told me this and she said, I'm like, it's still not official yet. Like, this just happened today. Just keeping your prayers. Let's hope everything's still confirmed. And I had a feeling. I told her that when Abuna Mina chooses, he chooses to help. When Abuna Mina helps, it's done. So have faith and may God complete. And up until now, she tells me, she's like, I go in for my eye exam every year and it's all clear. It's gone. Now she's married and happy and everything.
That's incredible.
This is something I've encountered myself.
Yeah. So you have a doctor that actually looked at this. You have her professor that looked at this. Mm-hmm. You have a fellow student that looked at her eye. Yeah. Two of them, actually. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's incredible.
And when I told this story actually to Tasoni Mariam, she was so joyful. She was like, I think this is the most powerful story to date. But of course, since then, this was
top 3 miracles. Yeah.
this was 2019, and since then, so many more have come out. He's working so many miracles.
Yeah, we hear it all the time from Copts all around the world. Oh, Father Mina did this. Father Mina did this. It's incredible, especially throughout a specific period of time. It was just non-stop.
So back to this miracle that I heard happen just 2 hours ago before I came. Someone called me and told me, he told me the following. So one of the underclassmen at my dental school, his parents were involved in a very horrific car accident. Horrific. He texted me in the middle of the night. And he told me, he's like, my parents got into a car accident. They were ejected from the car. And the car rolled over. They were hit by a drunk driver. The car rolled over 4 times, and they were ejected from the vehicle. They found his dad in a pool of blood, and his mom was between consciousness and unconsciousness. They thought that dad had died. And they found him in a pool of blood with other fluids. Like it was horrible. And he explained to me that he told me, he's like, please pray, please pray. So I remember getting up, and his parents were actually with Tasoni Mariam earlier. She was on a visit to the US, and they were with her and hosting her and all this stuff. And I remember just getting up, and I went up to his relics, and I told him, I'm like, am I going to go around telling people you're a worker of miracles when one of my friends, like he's about to lose his parents? I told him, I promise, if you don't go to them, I'm never going to talk about you as a worker of miracles again, because I can't. How am I going to have the gall to go around and talk to people and tell them he's a worker of miracles when one of my own friend's parents, like after serving Tasoni, like they died?
Yeah.
Tasoni also got news about this, and she was very distraught, very upset. She was just with them. And what ended up happening was they admitted them to the hospital, and the dad especially was in a horrible, horrible state. I think he had a brain bleed. He broke every rib. He broke his scapula. He had broken arms, legs. Actually, when I got the call, they sent me a video of what he looked like. It was horrible, graphic, terrible to see. They also sent me a picture of the car. It looked like it was just like a crumpled up cereal box. Like it was unrecognizable. And Tasoni was praying, and then the dad ended up seeing Father Mina standing over him in the hospital. And I called him, I'm telling you, I called him just 2 hours ago. And he told me, he described him to me. He said he came to me and he just smiled. He was wearing his glasses. He was wearing his tunic. He was wearing his festive vestments. And he was just standing over me, and I just saw clouds of incense all around.
That's the father saying that?
The father told me this personally, just a couple hours ago.
Oh.
And they thought there was no way they thought they were going to be paralyzed. He told me, he's like, my back was broken. And he's at work now.
What?
Yeah, he's like 1 second, Anthony, and he was talking to people like at work. And this was 3 months ago when the accident happened in August. And they did a little bit of physical therapy, but they're up and running, both of them. After being ejected from the car flipped over 4 times. The mom herself, I think, again, like her ribs were broken. They ended up like intubating her because they were crushing her lungs, and they took it out, and she's fine. And God was truly glorified in his martyr, Abuna Mina. This is something, again, like I just got this call like 2 hours ago before coming here.
Yeah. But I love your confidence in speaking to him. And telling him you must do this. I love that.
I mean, I couldn't imagine. I couldn't
Yeah.
imagine going around, saying like worker of miracles and
Yeah,
all these
they
things.
just hosted her, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it fair to say that he is your intercessor, or at least one of them?
Definitely one of them.
Definitely one
You
of them.
know.
Top three or
Yeah,
top
for
three?
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, because of the book, I love him as well. Probably not as much as you do. I wish I could. But he has definitely touched me a lot, and I mention him in every liturgy.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
know.
yeah. He means a lot to me, I have to say. Do you know if he has any stories of miracles or encounters with people outside the Coptic Church?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Actually, the second you said this, Father, an instance came to mind.
Tell us.
After the martyrdom, there was a worker who worked in the morgue, and he was present at the time when they were preparing Abuna's body. And they were washing his body, and and the blood was everywhere, and it was a horrible sight. This young man, he's a Muslim. He was looking at Father Mina. He's 39 years old, and he's just like, 39. You're so young. Now you're dead. You're dead. Like, that's it. Like, haram. Like, this is horrible. And one day, one of the priests who was helping prepare the body at the morgue was walking down the street, and he encounters this guy, this Muslim guy. And the guy tells him, I don't know if you remember me, but I was with you in the morgue the day your priest was shot. He said, oh yeah, I remember you. You work there. He's like, yes. He's like, I need you to explain something to me, because your priest keeps visiting me. Every single day I come back from work and I find him in the center of my apartment. His legs aren't touching the floor. He has a censer in his hand. He didn't say censer. He said he has this thing that he's swinging in his hand and smoke is coming out. Obviously, it's a censer. It's incense. And he's just looking at me and smiling. And then he just disappears. He doesn't say anything. That's very typical, by the way, of Abuna Mina. When he comes, he barely says anything, if anything at all. But he said, what is he trying to say? Why is he visiting me? So after they kind of had a little bit of a discussion, the priest came to know that this guy, these comments that he had, he's dead. He's like, Habibi, like, he's not dead. And I think he's coming to you to prove that to you, to prove to you that he is alive, and he's more alive than he was before, just like you were saying. That's one encounter that I know of someone not outside of the Coptic Church, someone outside of the faith, who dealt with him and interacted with him and saw him physically appear in his apartment.
Wow. That's impressive. That's great. Any other miracles, stories to share?
There's so much, but I don't know if you have the time.
Yeah, part of time, yeah. We don't want to make this too long. Anything else that just final thoughts about Abuna, about Tassoni, your relationship with him, Abuna Rafael that you mentioned? Any final thoughts?
I think one of the things that I want to touch on really quickly is what I picked up from Abuna's story. That sainthood is achievable. That martyrdom itself is achievable. I mentioned this in a lot of my talks about Abuna, but I can't let this go. But there's a quote by Saint Theophan the Recluse, who says, "He who refuses to give in to his sinful desires does the same as he who refuses to bow down and worship idols." A lot of times you think martyrdom is so far off that the martyrs, of course, they have such a high reward in heaven for offering their blood, shedding their blood for the sake of Christ. But it's not physical bloodshed that God requires of us. He wants us to as the Bible says, Yani, to die day by day for him, to die all the day for him. And this is done by really refusing to give in to these desires. We're equated with those who refuse to bow down and worship idols. Back in the day when the martyrs would storm the homes of the magistrates and rulers and governors and curse the idols and refuse to bow down to them. By us refusing to give in to our own sinful desires, our own lusts, our own anger, our own desire to gossip, this is martyrdom, because we're literally killing ourselves, killing the ego. And it's something that Father Mina proved to me, in that martyrdom and sainthood is not what we think in the eyes of God. It's not like Mark, like you were saying, it's not something drastic that we have to do. It's simplicity, and it's giving ourselves to Him, allowing Him to work in us, and giving Him the space to work in spite of our weakness.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you so much, Anthony. It was such a blessing, and I think a beautiful podcast. And we're so glad that you ended up doing this book. And like I said earlier, we can't wait for the other about Father Raphael. We're all very curious now. And so you must write it, and you must come back for another podcast.
Through your prayers.
We need a sequel.
Through your prayers, Father. Thank you.
So just a reminder, if you want to know more about Father Mina, A Spring in Sinai, right? Hero Martyr Mina Aboud is available on Amazon.
It's on Amazon, yeah.
Where else?
You can purchase it through the St. Moses Abbey bookstore. The publishing press is the one who printed, and there's a miracle actually that had to do with the choosing of the press, but I guess with the time constraint, we'll leave that to another time.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Mark, it's always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much. It was such a blessing to be here and
Thank
to
you,
partake
Mark.
in this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.